So all I've asked you to do, okay, I've given you a song, okay, in this case, Crazy in Love, right? And I want to find the mean word length of this song. And a strategy which you suggested, rather than going through and finding going every single word in the song, it's going to take too long, you said take a sample. Now I've just told you take a sample of 5 words, okay? So my sample size, if you like, is 5, okay? And just choose 5 words at random and find the mean of that sample of 5 words, okay? So I'm going to represent this on the board. Now, ordinarily, when I usually do this lesson, I get everybody to kind of come up and then draw the dots. I think that's a bad idea at the moment, okay? So maybe just call it out and then I just maybe draw it on there instead, okay? So you should hopefully all have a number. So along the x-axis, I've got x bar, okay? Now, x bar is the mean of my sample. Make sense? Okay? So in this case, it's the mean of each of your individual samples. And then on this side, I've got the frequency. In other words, how many times that particular number comes up. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group it together. So whatever your mean is, can you round it to the nearest integer, to the nearest whole number for me? Okay, so if you've got 5.3, round it to 5. If you've got 5.7, round it to 6. Make sense? Okay. So I'm going to go round and I'm going to ask you what all of your means are. So Mohammed, what did you get? 5. Okay. And then can you just call them out rather than me having to keep turning back and forwards?
4.
4. Okay.
5.
5.
4.
5. Okay.
5.
5. Alice, did you call yours out? 5 again.
5.
Another 5. Hoyja, did you get one?
5.
Another 5. Okay. Anybody else? Pengyi, have you called yours out? Jasper, you called yours? 4. Jasper, you called yours? Yeah? Dongyi, called yours?
I have said.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in other words, we've got like loads of 5s and we've got loads of 4s. Is this a good representation of what's happening? Why not?
I think to let some dots
Yeah, there's not enough samples. So what do you think I'm going to get you to do now? Do it again. So just call them out when you say them for me, or when you get them for me.
Round it.
Yeah, round it as much as you possibly can, just to make it a little bit clearer for me. Another 5. Okay, it's looking quite popular. Alice, you done yours yet? Or not quite? Wait, another 5. Dongyi.
6.
Another 6. Oh, interesting. Wei Zheng.
I got a 4.
Another 4. Okay. Dongyi. Oh, sorry. Pengyi.
5.
A 5. Jasper.
4.
4. Okay.
Still got a 5.
Another 5 from you, Mohammed. Hoyja, have you got one?
7.
A 7. Okay, interesting. Alice.
5.
A 5. And Nikki, you've called yours, haven't you? Okay. Yeah, you've got yours already. Okay, so we're starting to get a bit more of a picture. Maybe we're getting a few more sort of interesting results over here. Okay. Is there one that kind of looks like it should be an outlier? Like it should be a sort of a favourite, sorry? So what would you say, looking at this data, what would you say the mean word length is going to be? It's going to be about 5. Does that make sense? Because it's the one with the highest kind of frequency. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting a load of dots on here. Okay, I'm putting a load of dots on here. Can anybody tell me, in fact, no, I'm going to give you 30 seconds and I want you to discuss in your groups, on your tables, and maybe just think on your own if you're not in a table. What does each one of these dots represent? What does each one of these dots represent? So what does this dot represent? So just think for 30 seconds, then have a discussion, and then I want somebody to say, this is what this dot represents. Okay, so what do we reckon? What does a dot represent on here?
The mean of 5 random words.
Okay, so each dot, so maybe you might want to write this down if you're making notes. Each dot represents, this is really important, okay? Each dot represents the mean of a random sample of 5 words, okay? So each dot represents the mean of a random sample of 5 words, okay? Now, of course, you could argue, well, it's not truly random because, you know, some people might favour O and then some people might favour certain words, okay? But I think it's good enough for the time being, okay? So because each one of these dots represents a random sample of 5 words, what would you say the true population mean is going to be equal to? What's your best guess? What do you think it's going to be equal to? I would say so, something close to 5. Now, of course, I got you for the sake of sort of clarity to round to the nearest integer. Okay? Did anybody get 5 exactly when they calculated their mean? No, most people got like 4.8 or 4.7 or something, and then they ended up rounding, right? So okay, each one of these dots represents a random sample. So each one of these dots represents the sample mean. Does that make sense? Okay. So what you can see is that as you take more and more and more samples, would you be happy that x bar, the sample mean, approaches the population mean? Yeah, so this is the sample mean. And this here is the population mean. And remember, the condition for allowing the sample mean approaching the population mean is simply just take more and more samples. Now just be aware here, n, okay, this n represents the number of samples in that dot, okay? This here increases the number of times you're taking a sample. Does that make sense? So as you increase your sample size, as n approaches infinity, okay, increase the sample size, the sample mean should approach the population mean. Does that make sense? Okay. Now this is a really core idea. This is something called the central limit theorem. So I want to explore this in a little bit more detail, because actually the central limit theorem says something slightly different to this, but this is the kind of core idea, that as you take more and more samples, your sample mean should approach your population mean. And that makes sense, right? Because as you take more and more samples, if you're sampling randomly, it should be the case that you're now starting to look at more and more of the song, don't you? Start looking more and more of the song. And eventually, you're going to be looking at the entire song.
Yes, the maximum.
Yeah, exactly, the maximum, yeah? That's assuming that we can't sample the same word twice.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Does that make sense to people? Is that intuitive to people? As you increase the sample size, it should be that the sample mean should approach the population mean. Yeah? And we've kind of seen that before when we've done experiments ourselves. Remember when we were tossing that beanbag onto that circle? Yeah, paper circle. I said to increase the data, or increase the validity of the data, we had to do it more and more times. Does that make sense? Okay, good.